Hello everyone, my name is Lester Allen and I will be going through the labs for Biology 121, Molecular and Cellular Biology, taught by Professor Ming-Shu Wang for Malcom X College. So in your box, you should have 6 labs and a bag for personal protective equipment. So before going into the labs, we're going to talk about safety. And so safety would be all of your personal protective equipment, also known as PPE. So in your bag that contains your personal protective equipment, also known as PPE, you should have goggles, you should have a 250 milliliter beaker, you should have a 50 milliliter graduated cylinder, a bag that contains an apron, and gloves. So I'm going to show you how to put on your gloves properly and how to wear your apron properly and your goggles. So first off, gloves. I'm wearing a nitrile glove that's larger for my hand because I have larger hands. Notice I'm wearing long sleeves. Part of personal protective equipment is wearing long sleeves, closed-toed shoes, and making sure any long hair is tied back. So gloves on, goggles on, apron on. So now we are fully protected and ready for our experiment. In your box, you should have 6 labs in total. 1 being acid, rain, and buffers. 2 being cell membranes, diffusion, and osmosis. 3 being yeast respiration. 4 being enzymes and lactose intolerance. 5 being kidnapped. And 6 being plants in a bottle, photosynthesis and respiration. The first lab that we'll be doing is called acid, rain, and buffers. So find this lab and let's get started. In your acid, rain, and buffers lab, you should have a sample of acid rain, a pipette, a small beaker, 2 stirring rods, a sample of 2 different lake bed bottoms. One is sand and one is limestone. And you should have at least 10 pH strips. And notice that the pH strips start out in orange color, and then there's an indicator. Once you dip it in, it will change color, and you can use the color to tell the pH number. In this acid rain buffers video, we will answer a few questions. 1, what is a buffer? 2, how does acid rain affect the pH? 3, which lake bed bottom material serves as the best buffer? And 4, what are some naturally occurring buffers in your body? Okay, let's get started with the experiment. So the first lake bed material we will be testing to see how acid rain affects it will be sand. So sand here. So the first thing we need to do is add about 15 milliliters of water. You can add tap water, you can add bottled water, whatever you find available. So we're going to add about 15 milliliters of water. Okay, so that's 15 milliliters of water. And then we're going to add our lake bed material. So the first one is sand. We want to add sand. Okay, and so that increases the volume almost to 20. We're going to give this a good stir. You can use either end, the pointy end or the round end. I'm using the pointy end. Okay, so we're mixing up the sand. And we want to test the pH. So I'm taking one of our pH strips, dipping it into the solution, and observing the color and comparing it to our pH chart. So we can see this is about, I would say pH 5.5, and this is our 0-minute scan. So we have our 0 milliliter, and now we will add 0.5 milliliters of acid rain. So essentially, when we're adding our acid rain, you can just twist off the top. Notice where the 0.5 milliliter mark is on the pipette, which is about the second mark from the bottom. We're going to draw in some solution. So we squeeze the bulb, draw in about 0.5 milliliters, And then we slowly add in the 0.5 milliliters of acid rain. So imagine it's raining on a lake. It's been raining a lot lately. And then you just want to make sure the pipette is not directly on your desk. You can seal the acid rain. And then we want to stir our sand. So I just hold the base, stir, stir, stir. Let it equilibrate for about 30 seconds after you're done stirring. Okay. And then we're going to take another pH test strip. So that's about 30 seconds. We're going to dip in the pH test strip. And then we can place it below and let it dry afterwards. Okay. And then we're going to repeat that 3 more times. Notice the color is a little lighter. Okay, we draw in about 0.5 milliliters of acid rain. Drop, drop, drop. It's raining on the sand lake. Give it a good stir again. Okay. And then we test the pH again. So make sure it's a little dry before you put it down. Notice the color is getting lighter and lighter. Okay. So we're doing the last one after adding a total of 2 milliliters of acid rain to the sand lake bed. I found a pair of tweezers, so that makes it a little easier to dip it in the solution. Okay. And then you want to compare the color of each pH strip to the pH paper and record the pH. Okay, and then after you're done, you can take the solution of sand and pour it back into the container, keep it for later, or or you can dispose of it. Essentially, these things are safe to go down the drain. And then what I will do is wash the beaker out and then perform the same experiment with limestone. So we're going to repeat the same experiment with limestone. We're adding it into our beaker. We're going to add another 15 ml of tap water. Okay. Give it a good stir with your other stirring rod. Okay. Notice it's a little murky. And then we're going to test the pH strip of just the limestone by itself. Okay. So we just give it a little dip in, wave it around to dry it. And then we notice this one looks to be about the same, maybe a tad shade more basic than sand. But this is our 0 milliliter sample, and when it dries it might lighten. So now that we've completed the experiment, you can remove your gloves. And the way that you remove your gloves is typically you try to pull from your palm, pull out, and then you take the finger and you can roll your gloves out to make sure you don't get anything. Generally try to get your gloves to wrap into each other, and you can throw them in the trash. You can remove your goggles, take off your apron. Remember, you only have one apron, so you want to save that for later. Record your experiments, plot your charts in here, and then there's a few questions to answer. So a few questions that I had for myself while I was doing this experiment is, how does pH paper work? That might be an interesting thing to Google if you have some spare time. Also, I noticed that they gave you 2 extra strips of pH paper, and so what I did was I added another row and did 3 milliliters of acid to see if the effect was bigger. Yeah, have fun with it. Maybe try with those extra 2 strips of pH paper. You can try a couple different solutions around your house, common cleaning agents or baking soda, other things that maybe are interesting to you. But just know that science is something that you can play around with as long as you do it safely. Thanks for watching the video, and see you next week.